My mom treated me like I didn't belong, then kicked me out, so her new husband and his kids could take over the house. Years later, I took back full ownership and forced them out with legal control. When my dad passed away, I was 15. It was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. He was my rock, my guide in life, and honestly, the glue that held everything together. The house, the family, the structure, everything felt like it was built around him. And then just like that, he was gone. For a while, it was just silence and grief. The house still smelled like his aftershave, and his favorite chair by the fireplace stayed untouched. My mom wasn't exactly comforting during this time. She kept herself busy, and I thought maybe that was just her way of coping, but then, not even 6 months later, she drops a surprise she's seeing someone. Enter Dan. The guy was a total mismatch for her. My dad was meticulous and thoughtful, the kind of man who kept receipts from a decade ago just in case he needed them. Dan, on the other hand, was loud, messy, and let's be real, jobless, the kind of guy who thinks he's charming just because he knows a few jokes. Before I could even process that she was dating this dude, they were married. Yeah, married within months of my dad's death. No small ceremony, no family discussion, nothing, just a quick courthouse wedding, and suddenly Dan and his 2 kids, Lily and Kyle, were moving into our house. Now imagine this, I'm still grieving my dad, trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy, and here comes Dan with his kids acting like they've been here forever. Lily, the older one, was your typical spoiled stepsister. She had this permanent eye-roll attitude like the world revolved around her. Kyle, her younger brother, just followed her lead. Together, they made it clear I wasn't welcome in what was still technically my house. Dan, though, was the worst of them all. He'd plop himself in my dad's chair like it was his throne and bark orders at me like he owned the place. Hey, grab me a soda or turn the TV to the game, and my mom, she just let it happen. He's trying to make this a family, she'd say. Right, a family where I was suddenly the outsider. It didn't stop there. Slowly but surely, my dad's presence in the house started disappearing. His tools in the garage, Dan moved them out to make space for his stuff, which, by the way, was mostly junk. My dad's favorite mug replaced with Dan's oversized novelty cups. His chair, Dan took that over too, calling it his spot. Then came the day I noticed something truly heartbreaking. My dad's wedding photo was gone from the living room mantel. In its place was a photo of my mom and Dan from their rushed wedding. When I confronted her, she brushed it off like it was no big deal. "We're making new memories now," she said. I was furious, but what could I do? Lily and Kyle weren't any better. Lily treated the house like her personal palace, leaving her stuff everywhere and blasting music whenever she wanted. Kyle followed suit, making messes and acting like chores didn't exist. They'd take the good snacks, hog the TV, and ignore me completely. And when I finally stood up for myself, "You're being selfish," Mom said. "They're part of the family, now you need to adjust. Adjust to what being pushed aside, feeling like a stranger in my own home." It wasn't long before the tension boiled over. Lily and Kyle were having one of their usual loud movie nights in the living room, and I couldn't take it anymore. I asked them to turn it down so I could study. And Lily hit me with, "You can study in your room. We're not bothering you. We're not bothering you, seriously. It's my house too." I told them as much, and that's when Lily snapped back, "This isn't your house, it's our home now, so deal with it." I stormed off and told my mom what happened, thinking she'd at least back me up a little. Instead, she gave me the same tired line about making an effort. When I said I felt like I didn't even belong here anymore, she sighed and said, "Maybe it's best if you stayed with your grandparents for a while." And that was it. Just like that, I was out of my own house. I knew the house wasn't really theirs. It was still legally mine, thanks to my dad's will. They didn't know it yet, but once I turned 21, everything would change. I just had to wait. Moving in with my grandparents was both a relief and a gut check. On the one hand, I didn't have to deal with Dan, Lily, or Kyle treating me like an unwanted guest in my own house. On the other, it stung, knowing that my mom had basically chosen them over me. My grandparents didn't ask too many questions when I showed up with my bags. They just hugged me, told me I was always welcome, and set me up in the spare room. My grandpa even joked, "Well, at least now someone will appreciate my stories," and honestly, that helped lighten the mood. For a while I tried to convince myself that things would get better. Maybe my mom would wake up and realize what she'd done, or Dan would miraculously turn into a decent person. But the updates I got from her painted a very different picture. She'd call once a week acting like everything was great. "Oh, Dan installed a new shelf in the garage today," she'd say, or "Lily made us all dinner last night. It was so sweet." Meanwhile, I knew Dan wasn't paying for anything. My mom was footing the bills and Dan was just riding along. The worst was when she casually mentioned that Lily and Kyle were getting their own rooms. "We're turning your old room into Kyle's gaming space," she said, like it was nothing. My old room, the one I'd grown up in, now it was Kyle's. I couldn't hold back. "So you're just erasing me from the house?" I asked. She laughed nervously like I was overreacting. "It's not like that you're always welcome to visit." Sure, I was welcome as a guest. What really pushed me over the edge was the next phone call. My mom didn't even bother with small talk. So Dan and I were thinking she started, which was already a bad sign. "It might be a good idea if you give one of the properties your dad left you to Dan." I had to pause and make sure I heard her right. "You want me to give one of Dad's properties to Dan?" "Just one," she said, like it was no big deal. "It would help him feel like this is his family too." I couldn't believe it. "Mom, you do realize those properties are for my future, right? Dad left them to me for a reason." She sighed, annoyed like I was the unreasonable one. "Dan is trying so hard to make this family work. This could really bring us all closer," I snapped. "Closer? You kicked me out of the house for them, and now you want me to hand over part of Dad's legacy to a guy who hasn't worked a day in his life? No way!" She didn't call me selfish outright, but the tone was there. "You need to think about what's best for everyone, not just yourself," she said before hanging up. After that, I stopped answering her calls for a while. Living with my grandparents became my safe zone. They didn't hover, but they made sure I was okay. My grandma would slip snacks into my backpack when I wasn't looking, and my grandpa always found reasons to include me in whatever project he was working on. They gave me space to vent when I needed it, but never pried for details. At school, I threw myself into studying and hanging out with friends. It wasn't like I was trying to distract myself from the situation, okay? Maybe a little, but I realized that being around people who actually valued me made a huge difference. My grandparents' house felt more like home than my mom's ever did after Dan moved in. The calls from my mom didn't stop, though. She'd leave voicemails trying to guilt me back into her world. "I miss you," she'd say. "Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? Dan's making his famous chili," as if sitting across the table from Dan and his kids was some kind of treat. It wasn't just my mom either. Relatives started chiming in. "You need to forgive your mom," one aunt told me. "She's just trying to do what's best for everyone," another uncle said. "Family is family. You have to let this go." But none of them offered to take me in when my mom kicked me out. Funny how that works. Despite all of this, I kept reminding myself of one thing. Once I turned 21, everything my dad left me would officially be mine. The house, the properties, the savings, everything. Dan and his kids might think they'd settled in for good, but they didn't realize their time was running out. I started quietly planning for the day I could take it all back. I didn't tell my mom, of course. The less she knew, the better. I started researching renovation options for the house and even looked into rental prices in the area. My grandparents noticed, but they didn't ask too many questions. "You're planning ahead," my grandpa said one evening, nodding approvingly. "Your dad would be proud of that." That simple comment hit me harder than I expected. My dad had planned everything so carefully to make sure I had a future, and I wasn't going to let anyone, including Dan, take that away. For now, I played the waiting game. Mom and Dan were living it up in my dad's house, thinking they had all the time in the world. But in the back of my mind, I knew the clock was ticking, and when the time came, they'd have to face reality. When my 21st birthday finally came around, I didn't throw a big party or anything. There wasn't time for that. This was the day I'd been waiting for since I left my mom's house. Everything my dad left behind was officially mine now. No more waiting, no more playing nice, and no more watching Dan and his kids live rent-free in what was supposed to be my future. I started by calling my mom to let her know my plans. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much from the conversation, but I wanted to at least give her a heads up. "Hey Mom," I said, trying to keep things civil. "I just wanted to let you know I've decided to renovate the house." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before she said, "What do you mean renovate?" "I mean, I'm getting the house ready to rent out. It's officially mine now, so I'm moving forward with the plans I've been making." She didn't even try to hide her annoyance. "This is our home. How can you just kick us out?" I almost laughed. "You mean my home, the one you kicked me out of years ago, so Dan and his kids could take over that house?" "Don't be dramatic," she shot back. "You're always welcome here. This isn't about that. It's about family. Dan and I have worked so hard to make this a home, and now you're just taking it away." I wasn't about to get dragged into some guilt trip. "You've got 2 weeks to figure something out." I told her I'll be sending contractors in after that. She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I hung up before she could throw in any more excuses. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. I wasn't about to risk Dan and his kids turning this into a standoff by refusing to leave. The locks were changed within 2 days, and I made sure I had every key in hand. Of course, that didn't sit well with them. The day they came back from whatever trip they'd been on, my phone started blowing up. First, it was my mom. Her voicemails were a mix of angry yelling and fake crying. "How could you do this to us?" she wailed in one. "This is our home!" Then came the calls from Dan. He tried to play tough guy, but it was honestly laughable. "You can't just kick us out like this," he barked in one voicemail. "We've got rights." I didn't bother responding to either of them. Instead, I texted my mom, "You have 2 weeks to move out, that's more than fair." After I got the house back and gave them their 2 weeks to leave, I honestly thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Those 2 weeks turned into some of the most stressful and ridiculous days of my life. If I thought Dan and his kids were entitled before they turned it up to 11, once they realized their freeloading days were numbered. At first, they tried ignoring the whole situation like pretending it wasn't real would somehow make it go away. I drove by the house a few days after changing the locks and saw no signs of them packing, no moving boxes, no moving truck, nothing. They were still sitting around like they had all the time in the world. I confronted my mom about it. "You guys haven't even started packing," I said. "I told you have 2 weeks. She gave me that fake, patronizing smile she always used when she thought she could manipulate me. "We're just getting everything in order," she said. "It's a big transition. You know, these things take time." "Time is exactly what you don't have," I replied. "You've already wasted a week." Mom tried to laugh it off like I was being dramatic. "You need to calm down. We'll handle it." But they weren't handling anything, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting for them to drag this out. The day before the deadline, things hit a whole new level of absurdity. I stopped by the house to check on their progress and found my mom, Dan, and Lily sitting in the living room like nothing was happening. There were no signs of packing, just a family lounging around like they didn't have a care in the world. "What the heck is going on?" I asked. "You're supposed to be out tomorrow." Mom stood up, putting on her best innocent act. "We're working on it," she said. It's been hard. Lily's pregnancy has been difficult and Dan's been stressed. We just need a little more time." "No," I said firmly. "You've had 2 weeks, that's more than enough time." Dan exploded. "How can you treat us like this after everything we've done for this family?" I turned to him. "Done for this family like what?" They kept begging, but I didn't budge. The final day arrived and I was ready for it to be over. It had been 2 weeks of nonsense, begging, guilt trips, fake tears, and downright absurd demands. I had held firm through all of it, but I knew this last day wouldn't go quietly. I drove up to the house early in the morning. I wanted to make sure they were actually moving out this time. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a few boxes scattered outside, but no moving truck, no sign of them being anywhere near finished. It was already looking like another headache. As I got out of the car, my mom stormed out the front door. "Oh, so you decided to show up?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "Yeah, I figured I'd make sure you were actually packing," I shot back. "You've had 2 weeks, and it doesn't look like much has changed." She rolled her eyes and waved a hand toward the house. "We're working on it." "Okay, moving is hard. You wouldn't understand." I stepped up onto the porch trying to keep my cool. "What's hard to understand? I even gave you that much time when I didn't have to. You're just dragging this out because you think I'll cave." Before she could respond, Dan came out looking like he was ready for a fight. "What's your problem, kid?" he barked, standing a little too close for comfort. "We've got nowhere to go, and you're over here acting like a big shot. You think this makes you a man, throwing your family out?" I crossed my arms and stared him down. "First of all, let's get something straight. You're not my family. Second, you've had plenty of time to figure this out. If you're still here when the movers arrive, that's on you." Dan's face turned red, and I could tell he was trying to intimidate me. "You know your dad would be ashamed of you right now," he said through gritted teeth. That one stung, but I wasn't about to let him see it. "Nice try, Dan, but my dad's the reason you're even standing in this house right now. Don't talk about him like you knew him." By this point, Lily came out, her arms crossed over her belly. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, her voice trembling. "How can you be so heartless?" I sighed. "Lily, I've already told you I'm sorry for your situation, but it's not my responsibility. If you had spent less time sitting around and more time packing, maybe you wouldn't be in this position right now." Mom stepped forward, clearly ready to play referee. "You're tearing this family apart," she shouted. "Is that what you want to destroy? Everything your father built?" "That was it," I snapped. "Destroy everything my father built? You mean the house he worked for, the house he left to me, that you let Dan and his kids take over like it was theirs? Don't put this on me. This is your mess, not mine. Mom stood there stunned for a moment before the tears started. She covered her face and sobbed, saying, I just don't understand how you can be so cruel. Meanwhile, Dan wasn't giving up. He started pacing back and forth, muttering under his breath about how unfair this all was. Finally, he stopped and pointed at me. You think you're so smart, don't you? Coming in here and taking what's yours? Well, let me tell you something. You're going to regret this one day. You're going to look back and realize you ruined this family. I didn't even flinch. The only thing I'm going to regret is not doing this sooner. You've had years to get your life together, Dan, and instead you've just been mooching off my mom and acting like you own the place. Well, guess what, you don't, and now it's time for you to go. Kyle, who had been lurking near the door this whole time, finally decided to speak up. This is so unfair, he whined. We've done nothing but treat this place like home, and now you're just kicking us out. Exactly. I said this isn't your home, it's mine. And if you don't want to be out on the street, I suggest you stop whining and start packing. By noon, the movers I had scheduled showed up. I'd warned them ahead of time that there might be some complications, so they came ready to work. Mom tried one last desperate plea as they started moving boxes. Please just give us one more week, she begged. Lily is stressed and Dan is looking for work. It's just a lot to handle right now. I shook my head. I've given you more time than you deserve. You've got the rest of today, and that's it. Dan was still grumbling in the background, but even he seemed to realize the fight was over. By the time the sun started setting, they were finally packed up. The truck was loaded and they were standing on the porch looking defeated. Mom turned to me, her eyes red and puffy. You've really changed, you know that. She said, I don't even recognize you anymore. I stared back at her unfazed. I've changed because I had to. Mom, you made your choice, now I'm making mine. Dan muttered something under his breath, but I didn't bother responding. Lily climbed into the truck, still clutching her belly like it was some kind of shield. Kyle followed, looking more annoyed than anything else. Finally, Mom stepped down from the porch, wiping her eyes. I hope you're happy, she said. You've gotten everything you wanted. I didn't respond. I just watched as they drove off, leaving behind the house that was finally mine again. When they were gone, I stood in the empty living room, taking it all in. It felt strange standing there alone after everything that had happened, but it also felt right. This was my dad's house, and now it was back where it belonged. I knew there was still work to be done, renovations, new tenants, rebuilding my life, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. Once they were officially out of the house, I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they'd move on, find somewhere else to live, and I could finally close this chapter of my life, but of course that's not how entitled people work. Dan, my mom and her so-called new family couldn't just leave me alone. They came crawling back, each with their own manipulative tactics to get me to take them back in. It started small. About a week after they moved out, I got a text from my mom. Hey, just checking in, it read. How's everything going with the renovations? I stared at my phone, debating whether to answer. I knew this wasn't just a friendly text. I could feel the strings attached even through the screen. Against my better judgment, I replied, everything's fine. That was all she needed. Within minutes, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't in the mood for one of her guilt trips. Later, when I listened to the message, it was exactly what I expected. Hey, sweetie, I've been thinking about everything, and I really think we should talk. Dan's been struggling to find work, and Lily is really feeling the stress of her pregnancy. We're all trying so hard, but it's been really tough without a stable place to stay. Maybe we can figure something out. Call me back, okay? I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Figure something out. I'd already figured everything out. I gave them 2 weeks to leave and they failed to prepare. That wasn't my fault. Over the next few days, the attempts escalated. First, it was Dan calling me directly. I didn't even save his number, but his obnoxious tone was unmistakable. Look, kid, he started, as if we were about to have some heart-to-heart. I know we've had our differences, but I think it's time we put all that behind us. Family is family, you know? And I get it. You were upset, and maybe I didn't handle things perfectly, but we're all human. We just need a little help getting back on our feet. You can't expect us to do that without some kind of support. I nearly laughed out loud. Support? Support from me after years of freeloading and treating me like an outsider in my own home. He thought he could appeal to my sense of charity. Dan, I said flatly, you've had years to get back on your feet. My answer is no. He tried to argue bringing up Lily's pregnancy and Kyle's supposed emotional struggles. It's been hard on all of us, he said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. We're not asking for much, just a roof over our heads until we figure things out. I cut him off. No, Dan, I already gave you plenty of time. That was more than generous. Find someone else to guilt trip. Then came Lily's turn. She messaged me one evening, starting off with a pathetic, "Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." I didn't reply because I knew exactly where this was heading. Sure enough, a follow-up text came through an hour later. "I'm really struggling with the pregnancy." She wrote, "The stress of not knowing where we're going to live is affecting me and the baby. I know we didn't always get along, but I thought maybe we could start fresh. It would mean so much to me if you could just let us stay for a little while, just until after the baby is born." I didn't even bother responding. I wasn't about to get sucked into her sad story. A few days later, my mom showed up at my grandparents' house unannounced. She was clearly desperate. Her hair was a mess, and she had that frantic look she always got when things weren't going her way. My grandparents let her in, though they weren't exactly thrilled to see her after everything that had happened. "Can we talk?" she asked, looking at me with what I'm sure she thought was a motherly expression. I folded my arms and leaned against the counter. "What do you want, Mom?" She sighed dramatically, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I just want us to be a family again," she said. "This whole situation has gotten so out of hand. I know you're angry, but we can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I replied. "You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences." "But Lily's pregnant," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. "She needs stability. Dan's been looking for jobs. But it's hard right now, and Kyle, he's just a kid. He doesn't deserve this. And neither did I." I shot back. "You didn't care about my stability when you kicked me out of the house. You didn't care about how I felt when you let Dan take over. Why should I care now?" My mom tried to guilt me, saying things like, "I'm still your mother, and I did the best I could, but I wasn't buying it." My grandparents eventually stepped in and told her it was time to leave. As she walked out the door, she muttered, "You're going to regret this one day." The final straw came when they showed up at the house unannounced. I was there meeting with the contractors, going over some last-minute details for the renovations, when Dan's beat-up truck pulled into the driveway. I froze for a moment, watching as Dan, my mom, and Lily climbed out, looking like they were ready for some kind of intervention. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. Dan was the first to speak. "We just want to talk," he said, holding up his hands like he was trying to defuse a situation. "There's nothing to talk about," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." "We're desperate," my mom said, her voice cracking. "We've been staying with friends, but it's not working out. We need your help." I stared at them, completely unimpressed. "You mean you need me to let you back into the house you trashed and disrespected for years? That's not happening." Lily started crying, clutching her belly for added effect. "Please," she begged. "I don't know what else to do." Dan stepped forward, trying to play tough again. "You're really going to turn your back on us after everything we've been through?" I crossed my arms and stood my ground. "Yes, I am. You've got 5 minutes to leave, or I'm calling the police." They tried one last round of pleading, but when they realized I wasn't budging, they finally got back in the truck and drove off. That was the last time they tried to reach out. I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to a tiny apartment across town, and honestly, that was fine by me. They were no longer my problem, and I could finally focus on moving forward with my life. One thing's for sure, I'm not letting them back into my life, no matter what sad story they come up with next. I'll update you all if anything changes. Something tells me this isn't the last I've heard from them. Update. Well, I knew it wouldn't be long before my mom came back around. Like I said in my last post, people like her and Dan don't just disappear quietly, but even I didn't expect what happened next. A few weeks ago, I got another message from her. This one wasn't like the others, though. There was no guilt trip, no manipulation, no desperate plea to let them back into the house. It was short and to the point. "Can we talk? I owe you an apology." At first, I didn't respond. I mean, what was there to say? An apology now? It felt pointless, but then I figured, what the heck? I was curious. We met at a coffee shop near my grandparents' place. I kept it public because I didn't want it turning into a scene. When I walked in, she looked different, tired, worn down, not the confident, smug version of my mom I'd grown used to. She started talking before I even sat down. "I need to apologize," she said, "for everything." I didn't say anything, just nodded for her to keep going. She took a deep breath and continued, "I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't see it until now. Dan, he's not who I thought he was." Apparently, things had gone south for her and Dan after they moved out. Without the house and the free ride, Dan had shown his true colors. According to her, he'd become angry, controlling, and completely different from the man she thought she married. "He treated me well when we were in the house," she said, her voice shaking, But once it was gone, once I didn't have anything else to offer, he changed. He blamed me for everything, for losing the house, for not finding him a job, for Lily's pregnancy stress. He yelled at me constantly, made me feel like everything was my fault. She paused for a moment, then added, "I'm filing for divorce." I wasn't surprised. I mean, Dan was always a leech. The only reason he was ever nice to her was because he was benefiting from the situation. Once that was gone, so was his facade. After spilling all of that, she looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have listened to you, but I was so caught up in trying to build this new life that I didn't realize what I was giving up. I lost you, and I don't blame you for hating me." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. I could see the regret on her face, and honestly, part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but the other part, the part that remembered being pushed out of my own home, wasn't ready to forgive so easily. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But you made your choices, Mom. You chose Dan and his kids over me. You let them treat me like I didn't matter. And now years later, you're coming to me because things didn't work out with him. Do you really expect me to just forget everything that happened?" She started crying, which only made me more uncomfortable. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. I want a chance to make things right. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to fix our relationship." I thought about it for a long time. I could tell she was genuinely sorry, but an apology doesn't erase years of hurt. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but I'm not ready to let you back into my life. You've burned too many bridges, and I'm still working on rebuilding my own future. I don't have the energy to deal with everything that comes with fixing this." She looked devastated, but she nodded. "I understand," she said softly. Before she left, she brought up the house. "I know you're renting it out now, but if you ever decide to live there again, just know I'd love to visit someday. Maybe things can be different." I shook my head. "The house isn't for us anymore, Mom. It's for me to build my future. That's what Dad left it for, and that's what I'm going to use it for." She nodded again, her shoulders slumped, and left without another word. Since then, I haven't heard much from her. She sends the occasional text, but I haven't responded. Honestly, I'm not sure if I will. I don't hate her, but I also don't trust her. The damage she did isn't something that can be undone with a few tears and an apology. As for the house, the renovations are officially done, and the tenants are moving in next week. It's beautiful now, a far cry from the chaotic mess it was when Dan and his family were there. Every time I walk through it, I feel like I'm honoring my dad's legacy in the best way possible. If my mom is genuinely working on herself, good for her, but I've learned to protect my peace and prioritize my future. Letting her back into my life, into my house, isn't part of that plan. I guess the lesson here is that some apologies come too late. You can forgive someone without giving them the power to hurt you, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Moving forward one step at a time and leaving the past where it belongs. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this. Reddit, maybe someday there will be more to share, but for now this feels like closure.